right, well, welcome back. Welcome back to On Deck. And we're now in Prep Test 87. We're in Section 2, and we're going to start off here with question number 11. And the issue presented to us is which one of the following is most strongly supported by the information above? Let's see what we have here. Unlike other mechanical devices, the clock did not evolve from the simple to the complex. The earliest clocks were also the most complicated. This is because early clocks were used primarily to predict astronomical phenomena, although the mechanisms they used for this purpose incidentally enabled one to keep the track of time. Who knew? I didn't know that. All right, so let me reread that sentence. And so we're talking about the earliest clocks were the most complicated. And you said, why is that? And the answer is, this is because early clocks were used primarily to predict astronomical phenomena through the mechanisms though the mechanisms they used for this purpose incidentally enabled one to keep track of time. Gradually, the timekeeping functions became more important and astronomical ones diminished. So in terms of what's strongly supported by this, again, this is more the shield than the sword. It's the clock, unlike other things, right, went from the complex to the simple. And let's see where they go with this. So certainly it's going to involve clocks, certainly it's going to involve going from the complex to the simple. But it goes from the complex to the simple because its purpose changed. It went from astronomical stuff to just what time is it? Okay. A, present-day clocks are of no use in their prediction of astronomical phenomena. And again, the only reason you would pick A is because you don't understand this test, right? That may be a perfectly valid statement outside in the world, but it's got nothing to do with this argument. So no, it's not A. B, the mechanism used to predict astronomical phenomena in at least some clocks were more complicated than most more recent mechanisms used for this function. No, I could see somebody picking B again because you're not reading textually. Just change the way you read, you'll go to law school. I mean, the problem with B is B starts off with, okay, the mechanism used to predict astronomical phenomena in at least some clocks were more complicated than most recent mechanisms used for this function. I don't have a clue, although I would infer that mechanisms used today to explain astronomical phenomena are probably more complicated than the initial clocks. C, clocks used only for keeping time do not differ appreciably in their mechanical complexity. No. D, the mechanisms that the earliest clocks used to predict astronomical phenomena were more complicated than the mechanisms used for timekeeping functions in some more recent clocks. Sign me up. That's now the sword. I mean, I'll read E because, why not? But absolutely, that is now comparing the mechanisms that measured astronomical phenomena in the past with some timekeeping functions in the future. And E, interest in predicting astronomical phenomena has declined steadily since the invention of the first mechanical clocks. The only reason I can think you'd pick E is because there's no F. Not a good reason. So the answer to number 11 is D for Drusus. Question number 12. Again, what do they disagree about? Regina and Amal. Okay, let's find out. Regina tells us that the additional revenue obtained from leasing government-owned toll bridge to private investors will be allocated to the transportation budget. Got it. So the leases will not be used to reduce shortfalls in other budget areas. Okay, all right, so Regina's taking a position that we let private investors take over the tolls, but the money from that is used to go to transportation, and so it's not going to reduce shortfalls in other budget areas. Got it. Amount. But allocating new revenue to transportation will free up existing transportation funds for use in other areas. Thus, the new revenue will nonetheless help reduce budget shortfalls in other areas. Well, seems like they disagree about whether or not the toll money will reduce shortfalls in other budget areas. Let's see what they come up with. It certainly seems to be what they disagree about. A, do they disagree that there will be shortfalls in budget areas other than transportation? No, there's no reason to think they disagree about that. B, do they disagree that the amount of money currently allocated to transportation is adequate? No, but they probably agree, but I don't know that one way or the other. C, do they disagree that new revenue from leasing government-owned toll bridges should be allocated to transportation? There's no evidence. It's not that Regina doesn't think that, she's simply pointing out that in her view, it's not going to reduce it in other areas, the deficit. D, new revenue allocated to transportation will result in existing transportation funds being reallocated to other areas. That is what they disagree about, for sure. Because Amal's saying that's exactly what's going to happen, and Regina's saying it's not going to happen. E, leasing government-owned toll bridges to private investors will be financially beneficial to the government. That's not, there is, again, whether you're using it as a sword or as a shield, the shield here would, it seems to me, shield you quite effectively from A, B, C, and E. That, but for sure, D is what they disagree about. Question number 13. Now they want me to weaken an argument. So which one of the following, if true, most seriously weakens the argument? Okay, give me the argument. So the argument here is the use of ordinary dictionaries in interpreting the law is justified in the same way that chemists use the periodic table. You stop for a second. It's an analogy. So you're going to weaken this by weakening the analogy. When you weaken the analogy of the dictionary to the periodic table, you win the argument. Okay, and here's what we learned. The periodic table is a convenient source of agreed upon background information that can be usefully applied to the problem on which a chemist is working. So it's agreed upon background information. Final sentence. In the same way, ordinary dictionaries can be useful to a legal interpreter in resolving terminological issues. Okay, issues in terminology. Okay, so for this conclusion to work, you have to establish that the dictionary serves the same purpose as the periodic table, which is that it's a convenient source of agreed upon background. It's agreed upon information. Okay. So now I want to weaken it. A, the periodic table lists the properties of the elements and presents them in a pattern to represent relations between them, while an ordinary dictionary mostly just gives an alphabetical ordering of the words it defines. Well, that just describes a difference in the way the material appears, not in whether or not the material would be helpful. So, no. B, there is wide agreement about the data on the periodic table, while disagreements between definitions in different ordinary dictionaries are likely to be relevant to legal interpretations. Sword, lop its neck off. That is for sure the answer. Now we'll keep reading, but that attacks the analogy. It distinguishes the periodic table from the dictionary. It's the answer. You can say to your client, it's B, I got to get out of here and not charge you more money. C, the use of the periodic table as a reference source actually came much later in history than the use of ordinary dictionaries to describe the meanings of words. Who cares? D, the periodic table contains only a relatively small amount of information that could, in theory, be memorized, while the information in an ordinary dictionary is likely to be too large for any one person to know all at once. Okay, and your point is, so what has that got to do with this? And E, the periodic table is used primarily by chemists, while the ordinary dictionaries are not used primarily by legal scholars and legal interpreters. Well, that has nothing to do with the argument, which is, well, maybe they don't, but they should. So the E's not helping me. So again, think about, I think it's fair to infer that as you practice IRAC, as you practice reading this way, I certainly think it's fair to say you're going to be using the shield more than the sword. I'm going to be using the sword probably more than you are, because I've been doing this forever, right? But that shield is very, very effective. And just be conscious that, again, you have to have a plan, you got to get this done, and man, that sword's going to help. Question number 14. Which one of the following most accurately expresses the overall conclusion of the argument? I'm just looking for the thing that's being explained. So let me see if I see the overall conclusion. Biologists are mistaken in thinking that the fossil record provides direct evidence of the course of human evolution. That statement's got to be explained. Now again, I'm going to read the whole thing for sure, right? But that has to be explained. This is a statement where you're saying somebody is mistaken. You have to explain to me why they're mistaken. So when you write or say, biologists are mistaken in thinking that the fossil record provides direct evidence of the course of human evolution, then my question to you is, why? Which means you've given me a conclusion, I want the reasoning. Now again, an argument can develop, and what appears to be a conclusion can turn out to be a premise. But if what I now read explains why the fossil record is not reliable to describe why it's not reliable evidence of human evolution, then I have the answer. It's that first sentence. Okay, here it goes. Second sentence. Fossils cannot be interpreted objectively. The physical characteristics by which they are classified invariably reflect the models the paleontologists wish to test. So again, that second sentence is attacking the reliability of the fossils themselves. Now, for example, classifying a pelvis as human because it's supported in upright posture requires taking for granted that bipedalism distinguished early humans from apes, meaning both apes and humans had pelvises and we're both bipedal, we walk on 2 feet. So the role in the argument of the second sentence and the third sentence is to explain the first sentence. So all I'm looking for are the words that mimic biologists are mistaken that the fossil record provides direct evidence of the course of human evolution. That's it. A. No early apes had pelvises that would support an upright posture. That is not the conclusion. That is B. The claims made by evolutionary theorists cannot be objectively tested. Again, both of these statements are used as evidence in an argument to support the author's conclusion that the biologists are mistaken. C. The fossil remains of some early human hominoids are difficult to distinguish from those of apes. Again, that's just a premise in there to support the argument's conclusion that you can't rely on this stuff. D. The fossil record does not directly reveal the course of human evolution, is simply a paraphrase of the first sentence. D is the answer. So what you want to do here is, in preparation of the test, they can paraphrase a statement and it remains the same statement, it's a paraphrase. So choice D is a paraphrase of the first sentence, and choice D is absolutely sword time. E. Paleontologists' classification of fossils are always influenced by the theories that these scientists are testing. Again, that was the second sentence. That's evidence used in support of the conclusion, which is answer choice D. So, on to question number 15. Which one of the following most reasonably completes the argument? Okay, here we go. The better we understand the behavior and ecological niche of an endangered species, the better chance we have of saving it. So just stop for a second. So the better I understand the behavior and the ecological niche, okay, like where are they, right, of an endangered species, the better chance we have of saving it. All right, so I want to understand the behavior and its ecological niche. Next sentence. And the more individuals of a species we study, the better we understand it. Well, son of a bitch. You mean if I have more of the creature and I have more niches to look at, the better I understand it. Therefore, well, that's a good thing, you know. So I don't have the exact words, but therefore, the more niches we have, and the more we have of the species, the better we're going to understand the behavior. And this is about saving it. So when I have this stuff, we're more likely to save it. The flip of that would be when we don't have this stuff, we're not going to be able to save it. So again, I don't have the exact words. I know where to go. Okay. So A, therefore, many endangered species will become extinct before we have the knowledge that is necessary to save them. I don't know that. Maybe that will not be true, and that we'll get the knowledge before they become extinct. So no. B, therefore, continued reduction of wildlife habitat will make the preservation of many endangered species impossible. Impossible? Perhaps difficult. The argument refers to a better chance, not to, so again, the language. So, no. C, knowledge that contributes to saving endangered species becomes harder to get as the species become more endangered. Yeah, I mean, I'll keep reading, but that's very close to me to a sword, because, I mean, again, you're looking at the flip of it, right? That this is C is saying, knowledge that contributes to saving endangered species, it's harder to get as the species become more endangered. Yeah, because you have less information. D, to save endangered species, it is more important to acquire the right kind of knowledge than to take action. Oh, shoot me. What does that got to do with it? Go away. E, the impact of human study on endangered species is sometimes more harmful than beneficial. Again, I can't. If you pick D, don't do it again, and there is no F, So the answer to question number 15 is C for Caligula, and we have completed questions 11 through 15.